Today we're talking about harps. Stick around. Hi, my name is Jason Buckingham. We're here at Alamo Music Center in downtown San Antonio. Check us out on alamomusic.com. Remember, subscribe and like to our videos. Today is a really special day. We have a guest to demonstrate this harp. We have with us today Pamela Martinez. Welcome.
Hi.
Well, let's start with you. Tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do here.
Sure. So I'm a San Antonio native. I grew up in San Antonio on both the west side when I was younger and the northeast side, which is where I went to high school and where I first learned harp at MacArthur High School. Music was always a very big part of my life, and I knew that I wanted to study music and make music my life, really. So I went right after high school. I left the week after high school and went on my journey really across the world, but that journey began at Berklee College of Music, which is in Boston, which I know you and I both went there, so we can talk about that in a little bit. In Boston, you know, my world definitely expanded musically, especially just being at Berklee. Mm-hmm. My network expanded, and obviously any musical experience in college, your knowledge expands. But what's so cool about Berklee is that it's not a classical school, and I was playing a classical instrument, and I chose it for that reason. We're talking about harp, but I actually studied violin in college.
Okay.
I started violin when I was in fourth grade through the public school system. And I mentioned MacArthur because my teacher, who is still there, I think she's just retiring now, Dr. Jan Garverick, had a harp and had studied harp herself in her doctorate studies. And so she asked if anyone in the orchestra wanted to play harp. And I was actually very young. I think I was a freshman, and I was too nervous. So I didn't raise my hand until she said it the next semester, the next year. And I was like, how come nobody said yes? And that's when I started playing harp. I would do private lessons with her and then private studies. So when I went to Berklee, I was there as a violinist, and I chose it because I knew I was a songwriter. I was already performing at every first Friday, anywhere my band could play. And I loved violin as a texture, but I didn't love it as, I never wanted to be a soloist. So I wanted to go somewhere where I could learn about music, popular music, mm-hmm. rock music, jazz music, listening, and production. And I chose Berklee, and it was totally the right decision.
Yeah, because I moved there, well, I went right out of high school from Casper, Wyoming. So going from Casper, Wyoming to Boston, and yeah, I mean, just the wide array of styles, people from all over the world, like, you know, completely changed my life. Just being around musicians from everywhere that played everything, and it was nice to be somewhere where you could be a bluegrass picker or whatever, and it was all like, it's great, cool, let me hear you play. It was just, everything was so open.
Yeah. And I loved it. I got to play violin in a new way. I got to think about music in the way that I wanted to, and really like find the ways in that I wanted to, which was particularly, I got taken under the wing of the music synth chair. So I got really into computer music, mm-hmm. and how sounds, I mean, are synthesized, and what sounds can do. And I would say that's still, and even before I was in synth, I was doing that acoustically. Like, I always liked extended techniques and getting kind of noisy sounds, or like chops is what they call them on the violin, where you're playing very percussively.
Yes, right.
So all of that was really, really interesting to me, and I was always songwriting. So the violin was my tool into songwriting. But, back then I also played harp, which is a harmonic instrument, played guitar, played piano, all the things that I still play. But yeah, and that time in Berkeley was like specifically fruitful, I think, not just for me, but for everybody there. Like I went to school with St. Vincent, who is Annie Clark, another Texas musician who's very famous. I went to school with Esmeralda Spalding, another famous musician,
Right.
And a lot of others that are very much working professionals. I met like world famous artists, and we were all playing together. So it was just a really amazing time. So after college or after that bachelor's, I ended up, always knew I wanted to teach. Like since being in high school, I knew I wanted to teach. So I got a music ed degree, but I studied a lot of synthesis. All that being said, I was in a tricky situation because I had a scholarship. It was tricky for me. It was a beautiful situation, actually. I had a scholarship that would pay up to a doctorate, but I couldn't take any breaks. And I was done with school.
Right.
I just was not. I wanted to be on tour. I wanted to be a performing musician.
Sure.
So I tried to go to get a master's. The other thing about this scholarship, it was in specific degrees. And so there was no performance degree. And, anyway, so I started a master's and I dropped out. And I went on tour. That was my first time kind of traveling the country and playing. While I was doing that, I was based out of Detroit. And then eventually, all my friends had moved to New York, and I was very hesitant because although Boston was a life-changing experience, I wasn't a huge fan of my life in Boston. And so I just assumed New York was like a bigger version of Boston and would be harder. But when I went, I loved it. I fell in love in the first week, and it's still my favorite place to be. So then I lived in New York for 11 years. And while I was in New York, I taught music. And for a good chunk of that, I was a touring musician. So I would teach like I do now privately. And then I'd leave for a few months and I've played all over. So traveled the US, circled it many times. Europe a few times, and Asia towards the end. Went to India and the Philippines and, China, Hong Kong, all of it. And, well, not all of it. There are places I have not been. And the other thing is when you tour, it really still is about the music and is about making a performance happen. So even though I've been all those places, I've been there in a certain way. So I still want to go back.
Sure.
I love traveling. But after a time, I got really tired just of being on the road. There's a lot of complications that come with that. So I wanted to stay put for a while. And I went back to New York. And in fact, when I say stay put, I wanted to, I gave up music. But my giving up music lasted a month. I just was I needed a rest, and there was a lot. Being a touring musician is hard for many reasons.
Yep.
And it's also great for many reasons, but you have to be ready to take on all of that. So when I gave up music, someone took me to a sound bath. Have you ever heard of a sound bath?
No.
A sound bath is a group meditation where everybody lies down and listens to music. So sometimes I call it a concert with your eyes closed. Other times it's kind of like it's ambient music, but it's acoustic. And it was the first time I had heard acoustic, ambient, like drone music from acoustic instruments. that sounded and gave me kind of the thrill that electronic instruments did. So it changed my life, not only because I loved the way it sounded, and I loved the texture, and I loved how people experienced that sound and what the sound did for not only just like creating an experience, but the brain, like it literally affects your brain waves. That's what I started to do.
Yeah, when I was at Boston, at Berkeley, it was about the time when we started hearing more and more about the connection of music and the brain. And I don't know if you know this, but a lot of that research was funded by NAMM.
Oh no, I didn't. Will you tell people? I have these.
Yeah, the National.
They may or may not know what
Yeah,
NAMM
the
is.
National Association of Music Merchants, and we're a part of that. Mr. Flores used to be on the board.
I didn't know that.
But a guy named Carl Brun, who actually did a year residency at the school, was talking about merchandising it in particular. And the whole rationale is like, we can't as an industry compete with bowling balls or golf clubs in terms of just raw advertising. But what we can do is put money into scientific research. So when all those things started coming out about, how it improves literacy and all that stuff, that was a deliberate attempt by the music industry, music merchants, to take a really different path in marketing our stuff. Because dollar-wise, like I said, we can't compete with some of these other people.
Yeah.
So we have to be smarter about it. He was also the spearhead behind Mr. Holland's Opus. That was his idea. And the Mr. Holland's
Flores?
Opus. No, Carl Brun.
Carl Brun.
Carl
Okay.
Brun was the director of marketing for Yamaha for a number of years.
Okay.
And from there he went and ran NAMM.
Okay. Cool.
And so
No,
a
I
lot
didn't
of
know any of that.
a lot of this stuff that you hear about to this day is funded by NAMM. And it's, all of a sudden you have music therapy majors, and there's one at Berkeley.
There is, yeah.
And it's getting more and more traction.
Yeah. Well, I also, as much as, it pings me to be like marketing, research, and the connection, I also think that it's very obvious. It's nice to have like the numbers and the data behind it, but it's very obvious that music is good for you.
It's obvious to us.
Yes.
As musicians, like we feel it in our bones. I think to non-musicians, it's a little bit of a shock, even though it's in their bones too.
Yeah.
You just gotta kind of nudge them in that direction to make those connections.
Yeah.
So they understand just how critical it is. To me, it's as important as food or water.
Totally.
You have to have that input,
Yeah.
that spiritual input.
Well, on that premise, that's what my studio is about. I lead sound baths there. I do them once a month. And I do them all over the city as well, usually at art museums or related cultural places. But I also run my studio as a way to connect to that wellness that is inherent in making music, and what music gives us not only as a physical practice, like something to do with your body in the same way someone might go running or walking or whatever it is that gets their energy into gets it out of their body, really gets it happening, flowing. But also as a way to connect to music in a way that mentally, or at least as far as the brain goes, that isn't always about creating perfection or performance. Because I think most of our music education is about get this done. It needs to be performed on this day. It has to be good enough. It has to be at least as close to perfection as you can get. But I don't think that's the life skill that music gives you.
And that's something, and I'm a former band director. One thing that I'm almost routinely horrified by, if I'm giving a kid a private lesson or giving a clinic, I'll ask, why are we doing this? Why are we playing this stuff? And a lot of times I'll get the sad answer of, well, it needs to be in tune. It needs to be in time. And I'm just like, that's not why we do this. It's important, but let's talk about why this exists. Because it's right. It's not to be perfect. And that a lot of times is just so horrifying when I say that out loud in front of students, in front of another adult. They're just like, no, like, just ride with me here.
Yeah.
Like, it's about the experience of giving those people an experience and you having that, it's a big happy feedback loop.
Yeah.
At least that's the way I've always looked at it.
Yeah, if you're not so overly stressed by whatever ideas of getting it perfect or getting it, whatever right, then it's a beautiful thing, and it's also a beautiful thing all by yourself. I think it's even more beneficial to individuals who can, have a stressful day, go home and just play.
And you teach composition too, right? And improvisation?
I teach a little bit of it in the private lesson world.
Okay.
So, when the awesome thing about being a private lesson teacher is that you're creating like a relationship and a mentorship. So every student has their own thing that they're working on. So some of them want to write, some of them want, have a piece they want to learn. Some of them really like other people's songs, and that's all we're doing. So it's very student driven. But yeah, I can right now I'm doing outside of the studio, I'm doing 2 teaching things, and one of them is at SACY. Have you heard of SACY? So SACY has different tracks, and so I'm working with their track called Hive. I don't remember what that stands for, but it's essentially like a interdisciplinary media group. And we are trying to build an electronic performance. So making contact mics, reading about how circuits work, looking at graphic scores, and just trying to build a performance together. Most of them are not musicians, so trying to understand what is music on the most basic level and how to do something as a group.
Sometimes those people have a better intuitive understanding of that stuff than trained musicians.
Well, they have their ear, like what they've heard and what they like,
right,
more than what they've been taught. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So kind of backtracking to post-Berklee, post-touring, starting to do sound baths, thinking of music for the first time in a self-healing way, a mindful way, rather than an ambitious way, or rather than a get this done in a certain timeline way. Just feeling music in that. Then music became more of an art. And obviously music is an art, but it became closer to the experience of performance art. And that has a totally different set of when something is done, or I don't know, it's just totally different, right? I don't have to perfect anything. I don't have to play somebody else's amazing. There's so much good music that other amazing people wrote. But I'm not trying to fit into that mold of that score or that person's mind or whatever.
You're more in the moment.
I'm very in the moment, yeah. And I love improvising. But when I kind of took this turn musically, I started to get into immersive theater. And immersive theater that is based mostly in music, but I started to work with a group called Whisper Lodge. And Whisper Lodge was a play that happened in New York. And immersive theater means basically that it's some version of an interactive theater. It's usually not on a stage. It flips theater on its head. And so what we did was work with, we built the first live ASMR spa. And I was yeah.
Cool.
So if you don't know what ASMR is, you obviously do because you're paying here.
I do, yeah.
Is autonomic sensory meridian response. I think I'm saying that right. They call it the tingles, and it's like a YouTube phenomenon, or it started as a YouTube phenomenon, where it's this type of video meant to, like, they're very quiet, they're very slow, they're very still, and they have been known to give people like tingles in their brain. But they're very relaxing, so a lot of people listen to them or watch them to relax. And some of those are very sound-based. So Whisper Lodge was a play where the whole thing was whispered. And when you walked in, everything was whispered and all the lights were down. And so the mood would change. And I was a performer, and eventually I became director of some of the shows. And it was just, it turned what I did, it expanded what I did. Because as a performer, I've always kind of had dancers or wanted to make a show. Like, I love a good performance. But when I started to move into theater, I thought a lot about space and what's surrounding the music, or what the music is highlighting in a space. Or how to sound in general, like suddenly whispering changes an experience. And we were so much about sound, like there were a lot of parts of this play. One of my favorite parts was when we would meet people, we would meet them on the street, and we would blindfold them and walk them to the venue. So they never knew where they were. And at the end, they would be blindfolded again and walked back to where we picked them up. So it was all about...
Wow.
Yeah. So
you're going to use your ears whether you like it or not.
Yes. So it was really great. And it was one of, an amazing part of my life that lives with me and is still happening right now. It's one of the creators lives in Singapore, so it's happening in Singapore right now. Yeah, but it also did really well for everybody involved. It was like in the New York Times, it was in the Atlantic, there's a feature on Netflix, was great. So that was at the point where my grandmother started to get sick, and I decided it was time to move back home to San Antonio. So that was the end of 2018. And, I'm really glad I came, but I'm just thinking about that transition was important but hard, and how, all of the things that I brought back with me, because I was away for 18 years. So I feel like I had a whole life away from here. And I feel really good about the things I've gotten to bring back. And one of those things is site-specific performance and these kind of very experimental ways of listening and performing.
So the whole reason why we're talking about harps now is because we've become dealers for Dusty Springs, a Portland-based harp manufacturer. And today we're looking at the Serrana 34, 34 being how many strings they are, and it's a lever harp, which you can see up here. And what do the levers do?
Sure. So a harp is a diatonic instrument, meaning it plays a scale. Right? So when I change the lever, I'm sharpening that sound.
Lydian.
Yeah. So that's what they do. Not all harps have a lever on every string, but what I love about Dusty harp strings that they usually do, because some harps will only have it on like C or only on C and F to get you into 2 extra keys. But I love that about Dusty strings.
So they designed this harp specifically for mariachi groups now that they're becoming more prevalent. I know they're designed to be a lot sturdier than probably harps have been for those ensembles before. They do have these legs so you can sit and play. They also have a stand. We don't have one in the store, but they have a four-legged stand that you can set the harp on so you can stand and play, and that's more often than not the way you'd see it with a mariachi group. Is that
No,
accurate?
well, with the mariachi groups that I've seen, they have these legs, and I think these legs, I didn't take them out, but they go inside the harp, so you can travel and it gets smaller, and then they come out depending on what size you want them to be. I'm sitting because I play mostly classical or kind of folk style harp, songwriting harp, but mariachi players stand up generally when they're playing. So these legs on the harp are to adjust for height. You can adjust the height depending on how tall you are and how high or low you want your harp.
Cool. And you have it kind of tricked out here. These are built with a pickup in it, which I had no idea was something that harps did. I'm learning all sorts of new stuff with this thing.
Yeah, so I'll play a little of that in a second, but if I can just talk about the harp a little bit.
Please do.
My student Juarez is going to play for us, so you get an example of mariachi playing on this harp. But I want to just show you some things about this harp. For instance, this harp, let me start by saying I own a Dusty harp string. It's an Allegra style harp. And so it's a little smaller than this. I think it has 26 strings, which is this one has 34, right?
Yes.
I could count.
Yep.
But we've got 1, 2, 3, 4.5 octaves. Oh, that might be what I have. I think this has 1 extra string because mine ends on a G. But my harp is all nylon strings, and this harp has 3 metal strings. And that's very different from their other harps. And that's because the lower you go, the more tension's put on that string, and they need to be metal. So as well on classical harps, the lower strings are metal, and the higher strings in a classical harp are made from gut. In folk harps, they're generally nylon. Nylon are less likely to break, a little more sturdy. And even though they're nylon, here in our upper register, they're I guess what you would call monofilament. I don't know if that's the right way to call it. But down here, they're coiled. So our bass notes are still coiled. That's just kind of how the sound comes out and how you get the different sounds out of the harp. But yeah, I also kind of want to talk about the pickup in here. There's 4 contact points for this pickup on the inside, and that means you're getting the different ranges of the frequencies. You've got your low, you've got a pickup down there, mid lows, mid and high. And I think that's really important. Dusty Strings is amazing at making pickups. I have their pickup in my Allegra so you can buy the pickup separately and install it yourself with a luthier or someone who's good at that. And you can actually do it yourself at home if you have those skills. But I also bought a Dusty Strings pickup for my concert harp. So their pickups are amazing. And the fact that this comes with the pickup installed is awesome because a lot of mariachi groups, you'll see them on stage. Well, it depends. Maybe they're playing at a party and they don't have to be super loud, and this is pretty loud. But if you're playing a concert, all those singers have microphones, all those guitars have either pickups or mics on them. Your harp's going to need the same thing. And if you have an amazing pickup system in your harp, that's so much brings you above in sound rather than miking it from the outside. It's just an awesome feature of this harp and what Dusty Strings does really well.
So this piece right here, this I guess would function like the guitar body on an acoustic. This is where the sound is being pushed, or
exactly. So we've got our resonator at the bottom, and you notice it's bigger at the bottom because you got your bass notes. The front of that is the soundboard, which is the most important piece of the harp. That's where the sound is going to, the quality of the sound. So this piece of wood, it looks beautiful. I imagine it's maple, but I'm not really sure.
I believe it's what did I read? Birch.
Birch. Okay. Yeah. So I don't know that much about woods, but this, I do know that sonically, this is your most important piece of wood in the harp. It creates the quality of your sound, and you can even hear when I'm just playing on it like a cajon, it would be, it resonates, that sound.
The frame, does that have any impact on the sound of the harp?
Well, like I said, your main sound is this, but I think in any instrument, all of the pieces make a difference.
Sure.
What is, I think, particular probably to mariachi is that you want to be cutting through. And so I don't think having, like this piece is not wood. The column is not wood. This looks like wood. I'm assuming it's painted wood, but I'm not sure.
I know this model is a combination of composite and wood.
Yeah, so
it's kind of built to take a beating.
Exactly, but the point is that it will, if it was wood, it'd be a rounder sound, like a smoother, more midzy. You'd have more, just a more velvety thing. But you want kind of a cut with mariachi, and a lot of mariachis. I just cut my nails, but a lot of mariachis play with their nails. So that was almost all nails. And let's see if I can get my nails in here. You can hear the back. But anyway, a lot of mariachi players play with their nails, and you want that kind of high-end push, that cut to come through. So I think this material really works for that. Yeah. And it's awesome. I mean, I know you have these in stock. We're in San Antonio, Texas. We have a lot of mariachis. There's awesome, amazing groups here and players. But just knowing that you are connected to Dusty Strings is awesome, because they make amazing harps in general in different sizes. So other harps could be ordered. And like I said, my Allegra is about this size. They make another one a little bigger that is a Ravena. They make a few of them, but yeah.
So in terms of taking care of the instruments, like how often do you need to change the strings?
Sure. Well, if you are a professional and you're playing all of the time, the idea would be to change the whole set every year.
Okay.
If, that being said, generally change them when they're broken.
Right.
It's kind of like, everybody, in the same way you would change them as a guitar player. You've got the advice, change them every year, and you've got the reality of when you actually need it or what you can afford. Because a set of strings, it's an investment.
Right.
A few $100s.
And now that we have the relationship with Dusty, we have access to the strings.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And you can buy one, or you can buy a whole set. So if you are a professional player, you want to carry a whole set with you, because something's going to bust just at some time. So you want to have that backup, which I have a backup of Dusty harp strings. But yeah.
Is there any other kind of maintenance that you need to do, like up here? Do you need to oil it from time to time, or?
So levers are, the actual lever part, the part you're moving, is a plastic piece, and they have these little kind of grooves or teeth that the string fits into. I've had my Dusty harp string for 20 years, and I've had to replace these levers, just the plastic part, because they'll get brittle and break. I think that costs like $5 or something for one of these. And these are actually a different style than the ones on mine. These, maybe not. They look a little wider. So I'm wondering if, the big difference of a folk harp and a concert harp oftentimes is the space between the strings, like how it measures. So it can be a little strange to move from harp to harp, but it's minor. I mean, any harpist can play any harp. It's just a little bit of a shift. It's like playing a new guitar, So yeah, sometimes you need to do that. That's a hard question, because if it was a concert harp, you'd need to do maintenance on it every year. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of machine parts in that, but this is a folk harp. There's not a lot of machine parts. So you're not making adjustments to it. That being said, you want to treat it the way you would treat any wooden instrument, meaning you don't want to expose it to extreme temperatures. You don't want to leave this in your car in a 98-degree day. You're going to get some warping. You don't want to get it wet, that kind of thing. So that's very basic instrument knowledge, but really important to make sure you adhere to, because you potentially can ruin your instrument in extreme weather or changing from one extreme to another. So if I've got a gig, I'm going to play outside all day, I need to make sure I give myself ample time to tune, because it might change tuning just from going from one environment to the other.
I used to teach drum corps, so keeping my brass line in tune in the afternoon and the evening, it was always an adventure because of humidity and temperature.
Yeah.
So I noticed the strings are different colors.
Yeah, so in the Dusty harp strings and concert strings, our reds are a C and our blues are Fs. So again, we're diatonic, meaning we're playing in a major scale. I'm starting on a red, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And if I keep going, it's just the scale, F, G, A, B, C, B, A. You get the idea.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a lot of resonance. So yeah, I feel like it's a great harp. I mean, we've got our carbon fiber column and other wooden pieces, and we've got our legs, and inside, I'm noticing something different from my harp. So on the inside of a harp, you've got a piece of wood here in the center that takes all the tension of the strings. There's hundreds of pounds of tension just pulling on these strings. So you've got a wooden piece. It's escaping me what the name of that is. But unlike my harp, inside we've also got some rods similar to a guitar, assuming those are some kind of tension rods, and you can either adjust those or they're just helping make this an even more sturdy instrument. But it's cool, I like it.
Yeah, this is really my first long-term exposure to a harp. I think I've only performed with a harp once in my life, and it was at Berkeley. And we brought the person in. They weren't a part of the rehearsal process. They were just a ringer. We brought them in once, and they were out the door.
Yeah.
They're also a glass harmonica player, too.
Oh.
So,
what does that look like? Is it
it's
the kind that you roll?
Yeah.
It's like...
Yeah, it's Benjamin Franklin invented it.
Do they have water? Do you play it with water?
The one I saw was about this long, and it had like a foot pedal that you'd have to keep the thing spinning.
Okay.
And like the player had like little bowls of water that she would wet her fingers and
in.
just, as it was spinning, just lightly touch.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I want one.
It was neat.
Yeah, so I kind of want to just play a little with the pedals and show you how different you can make a harp sound.
Yeah.
So I started playing with pedals back when I was in bands.
Do you need
and
this
yes,
closer?
if you'll get them closer to me, maybe I'll show them to the camera a little later. But I've got two pedals I'm using right now. One is a Line 6 delay modeler. I've had this for like 20 years. It's ancient. They still make them. But what I love about it, and what I love about if I'm using a delay, especially with the harp, is I like to have an expression pedal with it. Not only so I can kind of make these extremes happen with the time and the feeling of time in sound, but also because I cannot reach down there with my hands. Like, it's very different to play pedals on a harp. You either need a little table with your pedals, or you need to have total access with your feet. But I can't play and adjust anything. So an expression pedal is pretty important to me. The other pedal I have is a freeze pedal, and it looks a lot like a sustain pedal on a piano, and that's kind of what it's meant to do, is build sustain into whatever you're playing. So I'm just gonna choose any delay I've got here. and play a little with some space so you can hear the sound of the harp, and then you can hear when the delay comes in. Can you hear it? Okay. So we don't have a lot of signal out here. And what's cool about when we add space in, we get to really listen to what the effect is doing, which is one of my favorite things. Then the expression pedal. I'm changing not only the time of the delay. So you're hearing, I think I'm on a tape delay, so you hear it as if the tape speed was changing. But I'm also kind of playing with how the repeats are. And the beauty of working with this pedal in particular is that I can adjust all of those parameters. And adjust what my pedal's doing. And so with my, I'm going through the delay first, which maybe was not the right move. But with my sustain, this pedal can do a freeze, meaning I'm sampling the sound and then holding it. Or I can do, and that hold can be a permanent sustain, or it can be something that dies off. So I've chosen something that, am I on here? It's long, but it's gonna die. That's what it should do. So it needs a signal, I sample it, and it keeps going. And then and it's gonna die, so maybe I'll give it a new sound. Where we got that? Here it goes. And this harp only has 2 legs. I'm used to 4, so it's moving a little on me, but let that be my ending.
That is really cool.
I love it. I love all the toys. I love all the toys.
Yeah, in fact, there's a pickup and it kind of blew my mind anyway, but it just, you can do so much.
For sure.
Wow.
There's a lot of possibilities.
Well, that's the cool thing about music is just endless.
Yeah, and as you know, you've heard or you'll hear, I play very differently than Horace plays. So it's always what you bring to the instrument, but the instrument can speak the way you want it to. So yeah, and harp is a cool instrument that it actually, I feel like it never sounds bad. Like you can't make it, it just sounds good. It's a beautiful instrument.
Right.
It's diatonic, it feels great. You start at a good place and you get better and better. Kind of like a good piano. It just sounds good.
Right.
Yeah. So I want to introduce one of my students. I teach private lessons in downtown San Antonio at Southtown Music Studio. And I teach a lot of instruments, but I have one particularly talented harp student who plays with a mariachi group. His name is Juarez Elizarraz.
So this has been really, really cool. If people want to check out who you are and what you do, where can they find you?
So my artist name is Teletextile. All of my music on Spotify and YouTube and that I've released is under that name. You spell it Teletextile. My website is teletextile.org. And a lot of times when people are looking for things for me, they look up both my name, Pamela Martinez /teletextile. And that's a good way to find me because there's lots of Pamela Martinez's out there in the world. And so, yeah, there's the website, but I'm most active on Instagram. So it's just at Teletextile. And if you're interested in learning more about how I teach or taking lessons with me, that is www.southtownmusic.studio. And you can find out more about lessons.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for your time. Remember, visit us at alamomusic.com, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.